Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, October 2nd, 2015. The Middle East is spiraling into chaos and wider war. Just what I've been calling for months, that this thing's getting worse and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And just to show you how fast it spiraled into chaos, I mean, on Monday, this is Putin and Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama, sparring verbally over Syria's future. And a few days later, kaboom, Russia gets medieval on Syrian, what they call Syrian terrorists, and starts bombing people. They go to town on them and sorties in Syria. Now, the U.S. says, whoa, you're bombing our moderate rebels. And Vladimir Putin and Russia says, well, we're bombing the terrorists. And listen, you know what this is all about? This is all about who's going to control Syria. And, Ash Carter, the defense secretary, said this is doomed to fail. Well, it's not failing. Because the idea has been for the past several years, and I've been telling you about this, is that Russia was not going to allow Syria to fall, not going to allow the Assad regime to be booted out of office by a coalition of moderate rebels, which was Al-Qaeda in part, and not going to allow that to happen. I've told you before, Russia has a naval base there that costs billions of dollars. It's retrofitted for nuclear subs and nuclear ships. It is a strategic Eastern Mediterranean port for the Russians. There are other variety of reasons why Russia doesn't want Syria to fold, and it's going after the terrorists, it calls the terrorists in Syria. Now, those terrorists are ISIS, or they're Al-Qaeda, or moderate rebels, or anybody who stands up to Assad. And the U.S. is like backpedaling on its feet, like, whoa, what's going on? Russia seems to be in it for the long term. It has basically drafted 150,000 Russians into the military. It also sent the world's biggest nuclear-armed submarine to the coast of Syria, where it can handle nuclear submarines and ships and things like that, modern ships. It's the biggest, the largest nuclear-armed submarine in the world. It has something like the capability to have 200 warheads on it. The missiles have more than a 6,000-mile range, can easily hit the eastern United States, and that was also sent there early in September. While they were negotiating this deal, this Iranian deal, or they were contemplating it in Congress. And to me, it looks like the Russians are 100% totally serious. To me, President Obama and John Kerry look like a couple of buffoons in foreign policy. I mean, while you were negotiating this deal, you didn't realize any of this would happen. With Russia sending aircraft, and now ground forces are there. They're not being used yet, but they're drafting 150,000 Russians into the military. They're in it for the long term. They're in it for real. Now, there's all kinds of other things that can happen because of this. The Sunni Muslims that are fighting against the Assad, which is Shia regime. This is going to send up a call to arms for all the Sunnis. Sunnis outnumber the Shia about 9-1, about 90% Sunni and 10% Shia in the world of the Muslim world. And this is going to have fighters coming from all over. There are fighters reportedly from the U.S., 250 some-odd fighters are fighting for ISIS or ISIL in Syria. There's going to be fighters coming in from Turkey, from Pakistan, from Saudi Arabia. I mean, this is a huge mess. Maybe that's what Ash Carter was thinking. This isn't going to be easy or quick, but it looks like the Russians are going after them. And also, not just the Russians, the Iranians also have sent and have there already hundreds of troops, top troops in Syria, to have ground action against the people trying to unseat Assad. Call that Al-Qaeda, call that ISIS, ISIL, call that anybody Sunni, Muslim, but they're going after the people who are trying to kick out Assad. And as I've said, Assad's not going to be removed from power. Now, the U.S. says Assad, who's ruling Syria right now, any peace plan has to have Assad out. That's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. That is a fairy tale dreamland wish list. Now they're saying, well, maybe he can stay there while there's a transition. That's not going to happen. That's not what Putin's doing. He's using brute force to stop this once and for all. That's what he's doing. And the Europeans, I'll bet you, are probably in his corner with all this flood of refugees from Syria and Turkey and all over the place coming into Europe, which is not doing well financially. And what better way to crash the European economy is add a bunch of people that need stuff who are refugees coming in by the hundreds of thousands into Europe. As I've said, this is going to drive this the Middle East. This whole action and this deal and all this is just hyper driving the war prospects. Basically, why didn't we talk about that in our nuclear deal? That now you're not going to send troops to Syria, are you? And here we have hundreds of Iranian troops. Oh, and we're going to give them 150, 100, or 150 billion dollars. What part of this deal that we've signed? Really? You didn't ask about that in the deal, John Kerry? He doesn't even know what's in the side deal, which is the main deal of the inspection of the Iranian nuclear facilities. John Kerry said in Congress he doesn't know anything about it. He didn't have access to it, which is the main deal. You know, them not getting a nuclear weapon. That's what the P+5+1 and the all this whole negotiation has been all about. We're not going to. He doesn't know anything about the inspection of the nuclear facilities. But you mean that they couldn't anticipate the Iranians sending ground forces, top level Quds forces, ground forces into Syria? That wasn't part of the deal. This whole region looks to be going off like a Roman candle, and if that's not enough trouble. It also came out this week, they raised the Palestinian flag at the UN as an observer, not a official state yet, but the Palestinian leader, President Mahmoud Abbas, says that no longer will he abide by any of the agreements they've made with Israel. Abbas is blaming Israel and Netanyahu, which he says is a occupying power. And he's blaming Israel and Netanyahu for the breakdown. This can only mean, no matter whose side you're on, this can only mean increased tension, increased bloodshed, increased warfare, not only just in Israel, but all around the region. The whole region seems to be the Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Syria, Iraq. This whole thing seems to be on fire now. And it is not getting better, and it is getting worse at an alarming rate. Hillary Clinton's email scandal just keeps getting worse. Not only are the Russians basically sending troops and planes and teaming up with the Iran and Hezbollah in Syria, they have Russian hackers targeted Hillary's email. They said they, tried to send her parking tickets and tried to get her to click on to open it up. And, that didn't work because she hasn't driven for 20 years. But it was a secret to Americans. But I find it hard to believe that this was a secret to the global intelligence community. That's just too big of a secret to keep secret. Secretary of State, for the first time, you're using a private server in your basement or in somebody's bathroom or wherever reportedly it was, an unprotected server to do the government business, State Department business on a private server. Do you think when they found that out, do you think they would stop until that whole server was shut down? Do you think if they stopped at just sending her some request for a click on this traffic ticket, do you think the Russians stopped then? Do you think they would stop ever until they got into this thing? Do you think the Chinese would stop? Do you think Al-Qaeda would stop? You think ISIS would stop? You think anybody would stop once they found out that this server was a private server in a bathroom or a basement that was basically unprotected? This is just unbelievable. And remember, I got to tell you, General Petraeus had a stack of papers in his desk. He got a $100,000 fine and was forced to plead to a felony. He did not endanger national security. I don't see how having this private server didn't endanger national security. The charges that come to mind, the possible felony charges that come to mind that could be put upon Hillary Clinton and or her staff are stunning. I mean, the charges of mishandling classified information or top secret information, charges about perjury. Remember, she signed under the threat of perjury that she gave up all the emails. We found out that it wasn't true either. Also, obstruction of justice. Just a few of the charges that come to mind over all this. This is why I say, and I've been saying since before there was a single candidate running against her, when she was beating any and all Republicans, I say she won't be president. She's not going to be president. No way. Also, James Comey, the head of the FBI, was on Capitol Hill briefing legislators about this investigation. He's got his crack best team working on this. I find it hard to believe that after all this stuff bubbles out, that the FBI and the Justice Department's going to go, there's just nothing there. It's okay. No charges. It's okay. There's nothing there. I just hope they don't throw some poor 25-year-old under the bus and that person has to spend the next 20 years in prison for something that Hillary Clinton directed. It was her direction to have her own private server. Her idea. It's unbelievable. Next up, the USA Today and Planned Parenthood. I'm kind of doing these together. This is a USA Today. This is USA Today on 9/30 this past week, and Planned Parenthood, these gruesome videos with top medical doctors of Planned Parenthood on camera haggling over baby body parts and how much they could get for them is the basic premise of this. They wouldn't cover this story. Remember I told you about that? I called them and we covered it on our web. They buried it on their website. They never had it on their paper. I'm an avid reader of their newspaper, but yet lo and behold, they basically conduct a poll. USA Today conducts a poll, and look how favorable it is. Planned Parenthood supported in poll. More people support. This is the big blue 65%. They support it. Hey, maybe they should do a poll. This is a political statement, incidentally. This is not a poll somebody did that became news. This was their poll. This is more their news analysis, because this fits their left-wing wacko political view that Planned Parenthood shouldn't be defunded, and let's put out a story about how they're supported. By the American public. You can make a poll come out any way you want. Hey, I got a poll for you, USA Today. Ask people if they support Planned Parenthood cutting up baby body parts and selling them. Ask that. How about that for a poll? But in the story this week, and this is why this is newsworthy, the head of Planned Parenthood, Miss Richards, this woman right here, I think Cecilia Richards, she says that that they did not. These videos are deceptively edited, and they didn't sell baby body parts. They've done nothing wrong. That's what her contention is. Deceptively edited. In other words, don't believe what you see and hear. That the editing is so deceptive that they change the whole meaning of everything. That they really weren't on camera discussing baby body parts and the selling of baby body parts. That is an outrageous statement, and here's where USA comes in. There's an old adage in journalism, and that is if you allow somebody to say something in your story, whether it's video or written, and you allow somebody to say something, you quote somebody, it's like you saying it. It's like the paper said that these videos were deceptively edited. Edited so bad that it's totally false. That they made it look totally false. That's an outrageous charge, and that's an outrageous statement. I went on the Center for Medical Progress YouTube channel, and I looked up the videos, and I've seen the videos, and I've seen a lot of them already, the edited versions, and I just checked to see, how many unedited are they? 12 videos. Apparently unedited videos marked full footage. Go on the Center for Medical Progress YouTube channel. You can find them yourself. There's the edited and unedited video. And edited are in parts. And listen, I've been in television since the 70s. I was an investigative reporter in local TV. I was an investigative reporter at two networks, ABC and CNN. I didn't see the deception. I didn't see it at all. And even if I did see it, which I didn't, the full video is on there. And I called USA Today and said, hey, don't you have a duty not to put a provable lie in your newspaper? Don't you folks at USA Today, you are the nation's news, right? Yes. I talked to somebody, one of the editors said, you are the nation's news. Yeah, don't you have a duty to vet that? And make sure you don't put a provable lie out in your paper? Isn't that like you saying it? Yeah, well, we'll give you somebody else to talk to. I called for 2 days in a row trying to get a comment. Deceptively edited. So much that you couldn't believe the doctors, the top medical doctors at Planned Parenthood, haggling over tissue. And they always like to use a term like tissue to kind of clean it up, to sanitize it. Haggling over baby body parts. Baby body parts like brains, eyes, kidneys, livers, lungs, things like that. Baby body parts that they can do testing on, medical research. I ask USA Today that. Don't you have a duty? I mean, this to me is a provable lie, and you're putting it out as a research as a statement of truth that they were deceptively edited. Like, oh well, I guess they were totally. That's a provable lie, and USA Today is putting it out there. Shame on you, USA Today, for passing yourself off as a journalism organization when you are really just a left-wing, liberal, hack newspaper when you do things like that. If they looked at these videos, 12 of which full of it, should at least add, well, we looked at the videos and we didn't see it. Hey, I got an idea. Why don't you ask Miss Richards to put together a string of the videos and show where the lies are so deceptive that it really wasn't they were haggling over baby body parts, brains and kidneys and hearts and livers and things. Yeah, why don't you show me specifically where the deception is that bad where it changed the meaning of what these doctors were saying on camera. Let's see it. That's an outrageous charge. USA Today ought to be all over this. If that's true, USA Today ought to be all over that charge. But they're not. They omitted that. They lied by omission, in my opinion. Deceptively edited. A couple more orders of business. We had this terrible shooting out in Oregon, and I don't know what's going to happen with that, but Barack Obama never misses a chance to politicize a shooting for gun control, and he even said he was politicizing this shooting. Of course, I find it kind of bizarre that the shooter reportedly was asking people what religion they were before he shot them. Trying to get people's guns, especially in lieu of the fact that we're going to import thousands and thousands of more of these refugees, which the intelligence agencies say probably there's going to be a percentage of them are going to be radical Islamic terrorists. It's going to be awful hard to get people's guns away from them. Of course, this college out in Oregon was a gun-free zone. So the only person that had a gun was the mass murderer. That was the only person that had a gun other than maybe a security guard or two. That's outrageous to me that it comes on and starts pitching gun control. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was the fact that we had September come and go, no crash. Well, no crash in the typical sense. That doesn't mean that there was a lot of vibrations and shaking going on. I mean, we started out the month of September with a 1,000-point drop in the Dow, a flash crash, a huge point drop at the open, and of course the plunge protection team, I'm sure, was working overtime to bring that up. And then these giant, 300-400 point gyrations up and down in the stock market. The Chinese have lost 40% of the value of their market. The real went at one point into free fall and is way lower than it was, the value of it. We have, of course, this thing in Syria, but we also have the outrageous goings on of these mining companies that seem to be teetering on insolvency. We have more trouble in the oil patch with the bonds and the fracking going sour. And on top of that, you had people like Carl Icahn warning of a crash. And then you have the Federal Reserve, where the economy is so bad that the Federal Reserve can't raise rates by a measly 0.25% because it's so bad. So even though we didn't have a classic crash, we had plenty of signs, including verbal signs from people like Carl Icahn saying, "Ooh, this is a bubble, and a crash is coming." And I can only imagine what may happen here in October. It just seems like it's getting worse and worse at a faster and faster pace. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for your comments on usawatchdog.com. Thank you for your donations. That helps us out. Remember, fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, and above all, spiritually. Fear not. God's in control.